Hey there, Dengar Stu here. Today's video is about monitoring the state of charge and the state of health on the house bank in a cruising boat, and more specifically is about installing the Balmar SG200 battery monitor, and it's also proudly sponsored by marineengine.com. Monitoring the battery in a boat is pretty much like having a fuel gauge. You know, you want to know how much fuel you've got left, and you also want to know how much electricity you've got left. Both are very important in a boat. Other things that are important, for example, are how much fresh water do I have left, how full are the holding tanks or whatever. But today we're talking about the amount of electricity we have left in the house battery specifically. This is the battery monitor I've chosen. It's the Balmar SG200. So let's go back and I'll show you how I installed it. The idea with these battery monitors is they work very similar to, say, the fuel gauge in your car. The idea is they will tell you how long until the battery is empty if there's a current draw on it, or how long until it's charged if you're putting current into the battery. And it does this by building up knowledge of the battery over time. It measures both the battery's current state of charge and its current state of health. So as the battery gets older, it can still tell you how long until it's flat. It doesn't sort of get inaccurate as the battery gets older. For that reason, it needs to see the battery go through a few cycles and get a sense of you know, how much current it stores as you draw it, you know, what is the health of it. So it works with your house battery bank, which are deep cycle, you know, batteries that you draw for a while, then you charge when you start the motor or the solar's going. It doesn't work as well. It can still measure the voltage of your starting batteries, but because they never go through any cycles of being discharged and charged, it never actually learns the characteristics of the battery. So predominantly it's for monitoring your house batteries, but you can also have a quick look at the voltage of your starting batteries. All right, what we'll do is we'll start by showing you the installation process at the battery end, and then we'll go from there and run the wires up to the front of the boat. Okay, this component here is called a smart shunt, and a shunt is a device really where current comes across this shunt, this plate at the bottom, which has a known resistance. By measuring the voltage drop across that shunt, you can then tell how much current is passing due to the, you know, V equals IR relationship. A viewer commented recently saying, it's not so much the electrical stuff on the boat we've been doing isn't interesting, it's just that it's not necessarily explained in enough detail for people who don't know about electrics. And that's a really good comment. I think, you know, you see comments of people giving really good advice and you get the sense that everyone knows about this stuff, but it's not true. There's a sort of like a vocal minority who will offer advice, and then another 20,000 people going, what's that about? So I've got a separate video on voltage drop that explains this Ohm's law, but it's essentially the relationship between resistance, voltage, and current. And that's the principle that this shunt uses to determine how much current is being drawn from the batteries. I'll put a link to that video in the description. So this is the unit, but this is the diagram that's probably more illustrative. Okay, the idea here is that we've got a cable going from the negative of a house bank off to our ground bus bar. So we're going to disconnect that and put it to one side of the shunt, and then we're going to get a short cable and go from the shunt to the negative of the battery. Here I've got a made up factory lead, quite short. They say no more than a foot, and this is about a foot, so that's the kind of length we want. And this is what I'm going to use to connect it. What this means is that all current being drawn by all the devices from the house bank will go through this shunt. Then we have this positive lead, a light lead that just goes off to the positive of the house bank. And then we have another lead, which is this one with this Deutsch connector, which goes all the way up to wheelhouse and connects to the gauge on the dash. This end comes disconnected, so you can push it through your conduit nice and easy. We can tape that up, push it through a smaller space, and then all we have to do is push it into this connector. It kind of clicks in, and then push the T-piece in the end. And that's really it. So it's a reasonably straightforward install. We can then hook up a positive to our starting batteries to also get the voltage on the same display. The single display can do multiple battery banks. If you have another house bank you want to monitor, you don't need multiple displays, you just need a second shunt, and you install that. You can buy it separately, and then you can daisy chain these with these connectors and end up with multiple banks being cycled through on your display. The shunt itself can handle about 350 amps, so if you've got a really high current draw, you need to put 2 of them in parallel and then configure it appropriately, but you can do it. Alright, first step then, switch the batteries off and then go into the engine bay, disconnect the negative lead from the house battery and connect the shunt in place. Remind me to turn those on again, otherwise the beer will get warm. This is the space I'm going to mount the shunt on. It can't go more than, you know, like 30 centimeters from this negative terminal, so there aren't too many choices. But it's a non-conductive surface and it does fit, so we'll give it a roll. The negative terminal from the house bank comes across here with a relatively short lead and ties to the negative of the 12 volt bank, which then ties here across to the negative of the starting bank. So all 3 negatives are tied together. What I'm going to do is take this cable off completely, and then we're going to connect the shunt directly to the negative here. All right, now we'll disconnect the other side from the negative on the house bank. All right, this negative from the house bank is now going to come straight to the battery side of the shunt. So we'll spin that round. Then we need to connect this output side and join it up to the negative bus bar, which is in the lazarette. That actually connects off from the negative here of the starter. So I'll go from the negative of the starter to the cable side of the shunt. I'm going to screw the shunt down to the shelf first, then I'll attach the leads because I think the leads are going to be in the way of the screws. If you could get the leads coming off to the side, no trouble. And don't get me wrong, there's actually 3 screw holes here, so you can have a lead coming here and still get to side screws. There's lots of options, but I think mine are likely to come forward and I've already drilled the holes, so that's what I'll run with. Okay, secured down. So now I'll just take the nut off the back. I might get a socket and a ratchet for tightening that one. And below that is a spring washer. It turns out the only battery lead I've got with 10mm terminals on it is a red one. So I'm going to do a bit of a dodgy. I'm going to cut this heat shrink off. I'm going to wrap the entire length of it in this cloth black tape and then heat shrink the ends again over the top with black. Okay, now it's dressed up in its Halloween costume as a negative lead. Let's go install this. Next step now, cut these cable ties. Actually, don't think we even need to do that. Actually, I will, just in case there's some issue with the coil causing heat or whatever, the inductive coil. So we'll undo these cable ties and then we just need to get this ring terminal onto the positive of the house bank, which is up here. A few planes coming over. There's an Air Force base up the river at Richmond. I think that's where they're going. I'm not sure of the exact model, but they're the big ones. All right. Where were we? Okay, all right, I'll get some side cutters for this. This is the positive for the house bank here, so I'm just going to attach the positive lead from the smart shunt to there. The wash as the ferry goes by, sorry about that. Never work on a boat on the water if it makes you seasick. Worth noting that this fuse holder currently doesn't have a fuse in it. We're going to pop that in. Get this off with one hand. Probably not. There we go. We'll pop that in as the last stage of the process. Okay, for now, what we're going to do is take our long lead that goes up to the wheelhouse. And we can see we got P1 and P2, and we can plug it into either, but I'm going to go P1. All right, then we need to take this lead, feed it through our conduits all the way up to the wheelhouse to where the gauge is. Now I've got the cable run through, next thing to do is to install the gauge itself into the dash. Okay, here's the dash I'm going to be installing the dial for the Balmar monitor into. So I'm just going to take the back off here and have a look. The instruction manual called for a 53mm hole saw, and I've got a 51 and a 57. So let's have a look. Might actually put some calipers around it. Let's have a quick look what we've got in the way of wiggle room. So the unit is, yeah, 5263. This is pretty much 50. So 56. But I can see how, you know, hole saws always tend to wobble a little bit and make a hole bigger than they really are. The bezel around the outside is 60mm, but I am really loath to... I think I'm going to go the 51, see how it goes, and then I might even just file it out until it fits. If it was any closer to the hardware store, I'd go and get a 53, but yeah. Could I? Should I? Maybe I should. I can't decide. Nah, my rod's out. Don't worry, I'll stay here. I'm going to put the dial in between here because these are the sort of switches for electrical stuff, and this is monitoring, you know, batteries, so I think it makes most sense. Saves this side here over towards the steering wheel for being more for, you know, tacho, oil pressure, coolant temperature, that kind of stuff. So let's just center it. What have we got? 135 mils. So that's like 67 millimeters. Sound right? Double check. 67. 67, yep. And then this way we've got 130, so that's 65. Alright, gives us our center point for the drill. Wish me luck. Alright, now, not expecting this to fit in without a bit of massaging, but it's going to be close. It won't take much. I think I've only got a metal file on board, but that'll have to do. It's not even the one I was hoping for, but... Perfect. Done. And get my 8mm spanner and just snip it up. Alright, looks pretty good. So, next. Now the dial's installed, all I need to do is put the second Deutsch connector onto the end of the cable, plug it into the back of the dial, and put a fuse into the fuse holder on the positive of the house bank. This is the front of the connector here with the grommet around it, and we need to push these 4 connectors in through the back here. So they're labelled 1, 2, 3, 4, and then you can see here that we've got the pins labelled and then what colours they are. So this way round, number 1 is green. So we're going to push that through till we feel it click into position, and you can see it's right up at the front there. Now number 2 is down and number 2 is white. So we'll push the white down here. There we go, it's clicked in. Alright, and you can see all 4 of them are right up at the front. what we do now is take this locking T-piece, which they call the wedge lock, and push it into the face of the connector. It doesn't look like it, it's not 100%, oh yes, pretty symmetrical, doesn't look like it matters which way it goes. There we go. And you can still just see the metal below. Then this bit of heat shrink we can bring up and then just get a little bit of a flame onto that. I prefer using the heat gun for heat shrink like this, works heaps better, but having a few issues running that off the inverter at the moment. So this will do. Okay, this is the back of the monitor here, so we're just going to plug that connector in. So it clicks. Now what we're going to do is just pop a 10 amp fuse into the fuse holder for the unit. This has a screw hole where I could mount it. It's relatively short between the positive and the fuse holder, so I think I'm just going to leave it here. Anyway, we'll go turn the batteries back on and we'll see what we see. Alright, firmware validated. So we'll take the little screen cover off, push to continue, identifying network, please wait. Alright, so bank 1, state of charge 100%. Been on the charger all day, so that kind of makes sense. State of health, doesn't know yet because hasn't learnt the battery, that makes sense. So saying 0.8 of an amps is going into the battery. Reasonably sunny day still. It's kind of late afternoon, but you know, still going to get some sun on the solar cells. Only 2 of the 6 cells are connected at the moment. Up at 27.2 volts. Minutes left. So I think we can call that success. All up, it was a pretty simple install. Really, it's just putting the shunt in line so that it's got a point to measure the current draw from, a positive to the battery to both power this and to get a voltage measurement, run the cable supplied up to the front, push the connectors in, really straightforward. They just click in, plug it into the back of the unit, and you're kind of away. So happy with that, and obviously working straight away. Now, what we'll see over time, I'll show you this unit more in the future, but what I need to do is a few things I need to do. I need to buy some fused connectors, some cables, so that I can run a positive lead to my starting battery, so then I can also at least see the voltage of my starting battery from the same display. Then if I really wanted to, I could get a second shunt to put onto my 12 volt house bank, so I could see the health of that house bank as well as its state of charge. Not so sure I'm personally going to do that because it's a pretty trivial bank. It's just there for jump starting tinnies and this kind of stuff. So really what I want to know is the voltage of my starting bank and the health and how much time I have left in my house bank. I can't see that on the unit until this unit's had a chance to learn that house bank. It sort of starts to learn, does this heuristic approach. So we'll see that over time once the batteries have had a chance to be drawn down, recharged, etc. Then it will be able to give us more and more accurate information, which is kind of cool. Alright, so huge thanks to All Marine Spares for supplying the unit to me. Really thank you for that. And if you're interested, so All Marine Spares is a wholesaler. They don't sell stuff, but they sell to pretty much every, you know, major marine, you know, retailer and whatever in Australia. And if you're interested, if you're overseas, then just have a look for the Balmar unit online. I'll put a link in the description so you can see where you can get it directly. Alright, so I'm pretty happy now we can finally keep an eye on these batteries. As I said, I did actually have a cut in my solar cell wire, and that's the sort of thing that would have shown up really quickly on this unit. With regards to mounting, I've put it in the wheelhouse because it's the only sort of obvious place in a boat of this size to put it. But what I really liked is that Damien and Jess on Brewpeg, they have a battery monitor that they installed in the galley because they don't spend a lot of time in the wheelhouse. You're either underway, you know, and it's kind of nice to see too, but once you're at anchor and you're actually spending some time in a marina or whatever, you want the unit in a place where you'll see it regularly. And I really think they made a great choice in putting it in the galley, somewhere where they're just in there, they're cooking, they're washing up, they're there 3 times a day, they can monitor it. I guess all I'm really saying is have a think about how you're going to be using your boat and pick a place where you're going to be able to keep an eye on this regularly. So if something does go wrong, you'll know straight away. Alright, well take care and we'll catch you soon. See ya.